The 2021 NFL draft class is 4 years into their careers, and in today's video we're going to be going back and grading the first half of the first round of the 2021 draft, which is picks 1 through 16. We've now graded the 2022 through 2024 classes for anyone interested, and those videos will be linked at the end. The 2021 class was a very interesting draft, as there were 5 quarterbacks selected in the top 15 picks, and there were, dare we say it, not just one but multiple generational prospects at their respective positions at the top of this class. I know that's a strong word, but I think it's applicable to the 2021 draft. We will be going in reverse order, so we will be starting with the Cardinals selection of Zaven Collins and finishing with the Jags selection of Trevor Lawrence. And we all know why we're here, so without further ado, let's begin. Zaven Collins was the Cardinals' first-round pick in 2021, and we often talk about quarterbacks being victims of franchises failing them as players, or having a GM take a quarterback in a last-gasp effort to save his job, but Zaven Collins is in a similar situation as a defensive player. Not with the last-gasp effort to save the GM's job part, but the not having a plan with this player long-term part. Zaven Collins has been used in several different ways since being drafted back in 2021, including the first 2 years of his career at middle linebacker, before eventually settling in at edge over the past 2 years. Collins is a really good run-defending edge, and there's a purpose for players like that in the NFL, but drafting a run-setting edge at number 16 overall after he failed at inside linebacker in the first few years of his career is not a good draft process. I credit Jonathan Gannon for getting more out of Zaven Collins than the previous regime did, but that doesn't make this pick a good one due to a slight improvement over the past few years. I think Zaven Collins has a role in the NFL and will have a role for quite some time, but I also think it's fair to say he was underwhelming as a first-round pick. It's fair to say he's a solid player you'd like to have on your roster, at least where he is now in his career, but it's also fair to say he was not worth the 16th overall pick. 4 years later, this is a C. Mac Jones was the 5th quarterback selected in the first round, and believe it or not, there was a point in time where he looked like he was going to be the best quarterback in this class. He finished second in Offensive Rookie of the Year voting back in 2021 behind Jamar Chase and led the Patriots to a postseason appearance. Sure, they got beat, and even killed by Buffalo in the 2021 wildcard round, but the future looked bright for Mac and the Patriots. There was a very real thought at a time that they were going to transition from Tom Brady to Mac Jones, and yes, there was a year in between the two, but the thought was that Bill Belichick had his quarterback of the future. Unfortunately, that unraveled pretty quick, and over the next 2 years, Mac was just 8-17 as a starter, and in those 25 games, threw 24 touchdowns to 23 interceptions. The Patriots knew they had to do something at the quarterback position entering the 2024 offseason, and they eventually drafted Drake May. We obviously know the Mac Jones era ended on a sour note, but I don't think this grade is as simple as he's not good now and this is an F. This will also apply to another player later in the video. Mac looked really good in his rookie year at times, and while that obviously didn't last, that does count for something, and he played a big part in the Patriots' most recent postseason appearance. 4 years later, this is a D. The Jets traded up with the Vikings from pick 23 for their second first-round pick of the night, which was USC offensive lineman Elijah Vera Tucker. I liked AVT a lot as a prospect, as I thought he was a really good player, and a guy who could start at any guard or tackle position, regardless of side, and be good to go. And through 4 years, he's played at every position along the offensive line outside of center. Unfortunately, Vera Tucker has yet to play in a full 17-game season, though he played in at least 15 games twice. He suffered a torn triceps back in 2022 and had an Achilles injury in 2023, which prematurely ended his second and third seasons in the NFL. 2024 was a now or never year for Vera Tucker, and he played really good for the Jets this past year. Now, as we often discuss on the channel, availability is the best ability, and unfortunately AVT has only played in 43 of 68 possible career games, meaning he's missed 37% of all games since he was drafted. Injuries are unfortunately a part of the game, and I think this has to be factored into the grade. AVT was a bright spot for the Jets this past year, and I do think he is a Pro Bowl level talent when healthy, or an A level talent from a grade perspective, and hope he has continued success, but when you factor everything in with this pick 4 years later, this is a B. Rashawn Slater was the second tackle off the board in 2021, and I really liked this pick at the time for a few reasons. I thought Slater was an elite left tackle prospect and that both his tape and pre-draft measurements backed it up. Benching 33 reps while having a 94th percentile 10-yard split, as well as a 94th percentile short shuttle, alleviated any concerns I had about his arm length. Not only that, but I really liked the idea of drafting your franchise quarterback and your franchise left tackle in back-to-back drafts. Both players are young and can grow together, and more often than not, both Slater and Justin Herbert play well, and as we saw in 2024, it resulted in a lot more wins. Unfortunately, Slater tore his biceps just a few games into the 22 season and missed most of the year, but he bounced back in a big way in 23 and especially 2024, as he had the best year of his career and made his second career Pro Bowl. Rashawn Slater has not signed his contract extension yet, but when we discuss teams bringing in offensive linemen through free agency or trade, and discuss how great offensive linemen usually don't leave their teams until they're well into their 30s, that applies directly to Rashawn Slater. As long as he stays healthy, he should be the Charger starting left tackle for the next 4 or 5 years, and that's not an exaggeration to say. He does a good job both in the pass and run game, and this is an A+. Micah Parsons was the Cowboys' first-round pick, and in 2024 he became the 4th player ever to record 10-plus sacks in each of the first 4 years of his career. And over the last 2 years, Parsons ranks first in pressure rate, pass rush win rate, and is also first in double teams. Micah finished second in the Defensive Player of the Year voting in each of the first 2 years of his career, and finished third in 2023 before unfortunately missing 4 games this past year, in a year where he still recorded 12 sacks and made the Pro Bowl. I know people love getting their jokes in about the Cowboys and the NFC Championship game streak, but Parsons is far from the problem. He led the NFL in pressures in 2023 with 103, and was tied with 49ers pass rusher Nick Bosa back in 2022, as they each had 90, which also led the league. For reference, he finished 9th in 2021 as a rookie, and to at least be fair to Micah, he was used in a completely different way his rookie year, yet still finished top 10 in pressures. And for reference, he finished 7th in 2024 despite missing 4 games. Parsons is a game wrecker, and in 4 years, he's a 4-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time All-Pro, and is just 25 years old. This is Hall of Fame production, and I'd be pretty surprised if he does not win a Defensive Player of the Year before it's all said and done. An A+. Justin Fields for the Bears is up, and obviously we all know he is no longer a Bear, but I don't think the grade for this pick is as simple as the thought process of he didn't work out as a first-round quarterback, so it's automatically an F. There were some incredibly fun times for Bears fans when Justin Fields was the quarterback. Obviously, there were a lot more losses than they would have liked, as Justin finished his Bears tenure with a 10-28 record as the team starting quarterback, but he ran for over 1,100 yards in 2022 and had 25 total touchdowns that year. I think both things can be true regarding the Justin Fields situation, where the organization failed him and he also didn't live up to being a first-round pick. His situation was not ideal entering his rookie year, as everyone knew the GM and head coach were both on the hot seat, and they were fired after his rookie season. Ryan Poles more or less opted to openly tank down the stretch of the 22 season, and obviously that didn't do Justin any favors either. Unfortunately for Justin, the Panthers had the worst record in the league in 2023, which gave the Bears the opportunity to draft Caleb Williams number 1 overall. If Justin was this no doubt franchise-changing quarterback, they obviously wouldn't have selected Caleb Williams and would have traded down again. But it's also fair to say that Justin was nowhere close to the levels of some other quarterbacks that have been draft busts. 4 years later, this is a C-. Heisman-winning receiver Devontae Smith was the 3rd receiver taken in the top 10 picks of the 2021 draft, and Smitty has been a really good receiver for the Birds. Obviously, with all of the success Saquon Barkley had in 2024, and Jalen Hurts rushing for another 14 touchdowns too, somebody had to take a backseat in the 2024 Eagles offense. Devontae missed a few games, so that is absolutely worth noting, but had career lows in both targets and receiving yards this year. Now, unfortunately for Devontae, from a personal standpoint, another 2021 receiver in Jamar Chase had a huge 2024 season, which brings up the question of how should Devontae Smith be graded with a generational receiver in the same class. This is a challenge, but what has to be remembered is Smitty has over 4,000 career receiving yards and has 2 1,000-yard seasons to his name. This may come as a surprise because of how watered down the game has become, but Devontae also has never made the Pro Bowl. I love this selection when it was made because the Eagles actually jumped the Giants to make this pick, pick and ensure a division rival didn't get him in the process, but I don't think Devontae is a top 5 or 10 receiver in the league. He's a really good player, and I think he's been pretty close to everything the Eagles could have asked for, and 4 years later, this is an A-. Pat Surtain II is up, and he was the second corner taken in the 2021 draft and was the second corner taken in consecutive picks. Surtain was a really highly regarded prospect throughout the 2021 pre-draft process and was a consensus first-round pick. The only question was where he would go and which team would be getting a really good corner prospect from day one. Denver was ultimately the team, and in 4 years, Surtain is a 3-time Pro Bowler, a 2-time first-team All-Pro, and now, after the 2024 season, a Defensive Player of the Year award winner. Surtain has 11 career interceptions and 2 seasons with 4 interceptions, as he had 4 interceptions all the way back in his rookie season, which also included a pick 6 from division rival Justin Herbert. He's incredibly durable, as he's played in 66 of 68 possible career games. He eliminates opposing teams' number 1 receivers, and I asked Broncos fan Brandon Perna prior to the 2024 season if he was the best corner in football, to which he replied without even having to think about it, yeah, easy. And that describes this pick. The Broncos are on the way back up, and obviously Bo Nix and Sean Payton have a lot to do with it, but so does a 24-year-old corner in their prime. An easy A+. J.C. Horn was the first corner off the board, and I think the best way to describe this pick 4 years later is complicated. J.C. Horn has only played in 13 games or more in 2 of his 4 seasons, but when he's played, he's been good. Really good, but one of the reasons this pick is complicated is because of how good the pick immediately after J.C. Horn is in Pat Surtain. It adds to this pick because it's not an exaggeration to say that Surtain is on a Hall of Fame trajectory for the Broncos, while J.C. Horn has only played in 37 of 68 possible career games. And no matter how good you are, if you miss 46% of your career games, that's going to factor into the draft grade fair or not. If you watched any Panthers games in 2024, specifically when they were on defense, then you know this was not a talented group, and to be fair, they had several injuries, including a big win to defensive tackle Derek Brown. But J.C. Horn was one of the very few bright spots on a bad defense this past year, and he's been a bright spot for Carolina when he's played in his young career. We, of course, wish J.C. the best moving forward, and also wish him a huge congratulations on the contract extension, and hope he stays healthy more than he has in the first few years of his career. Based on talent alone, this grade would be an A, but because he's missed so much time in his career, unfortunately, this gets brought down to a B-. Penei Sewell was one of the best tackle prospects over the past several years, and he's played like it through the first 4 years. One of the craziest things to me with Penei when he was a draft prospect was how complete of a player he was while being just 20 years old. He didn't turn 21 until October of his rookie year, and this was the definition of a great player falling into the Lions' lap, and 4 years later, the Lions have reaped the benefits of drafting Penei Sewell. He played both left tackle and right tackle during his rookie year, and even kicked over to the left side a bit during the 2023 season, but throughout the draft process, you often hear the phrase that a guy is a plug-and-play player for several years, and Penei Sewell is that guy. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler and a 2-time first-team All-Pro, and this is before his 25th birthday. One of the knocks on Bo Nix and Michael Penix during last year's pre-draft process was that they were older prospects, and despite being drafted 3 years earlier, Penei Sewell is several months younger than both guys. The Lions gave him a 4-year contract extension worth over $110 million, and Penei is one of the biggest reasons, no pun intended, as to why the Lions have been so successful over the past few years. He's a kick rear ends and take names later kind of player. This is an easy A+. Jalen Waddle was the Dolphins' first-round pick, and they acquired this selection from the Eagles after trading back with the 49ers, then traded back up to go get Alabama receiver Jalen Waddle. Waddle, like a lot of Dolphins in 2024, had a really down year, as he had career lows across the board. As in everything. Targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns, as he only had 2 touchdowns in all of 2024. Jalen had a really good second season back in 2022, as he had over 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns, and given that it was the first year under Mike McDaniel, it was easy to project a very high future for Jalen and the Dolphins. But unfortunately, the last 2 years haven't been particularly kind to Jalen on the field for several reasons, whether it was his starting quarterback missing games, or him just not getting the football as much as he should. But because he has over 4,100 receiving yards in the first 4 years of his career, you can argue he's been everything the Dolphins could have hoped for when they made this pick, which makes this difficult to grade. He also set a franchise record for most receiving yards in the first 4 seasons of a career, and I think Jalen will bounce back in 2025 and be a 1,000-yard receiver for the 4th time in 5 years. This is an A-. Former LSU wide receiver Ja'Marr Chase was drafted 5th overall by the Bengals, and this paired him with his college quarterback Joe Burrow. A lot of people hate this word, but it was certainly fair to use for Ja'Marr Chase, and it's that he was a generational prospect. And he was. He ran a 4.34 40, jumped 41 inches in the vertical, had an 11-foot broad jump, and benched 225 23 times at just 201 pounds. He was the best receiver to come out since Julio Jones back in 2011, and he's played like it through the first 4 years. He set an NFL record back in 2021 for most receiving yards in a year for a rookie, that includes the postseason, as well as the most receiving yards in a single game, and was the youngest NFL player with multiple 100-yard receiving games in a single postseason, and the most receiving yards in a single game was for rookies. He won the Triple Crown in 2024 as he would go on to have a 127-catch, 1,708-yard, 17-touchdown season, and was the best receiver in football this past year. Ja'Marr Chase and Micah Parsons are the only 2 players to be able to say this from the 2021 draft class, but they are both already 4-time Pro Bowlers. Ja'Marr is only 25 years old and will undoubtedly be getting paid soon, and the only question is, especially with the salary cap going up year by year, is how much. 46 touchdowns in 4 years is downright insane, and he is a franchise cornerstone. This pick could not have worked out better, and it's an A+. Kyle Pitts of the Falcons is up, and this is a tough pick to grade for several reasons. Pitts obviously had a tremendous rookie season back in 2021 as he became the 2nd rookie tight end to ever have 1,000 yards in his rookie year. Brock Bowers, of course, became the 3rd in 2024. Now, people talk about the Atlanta Falcons passing on Ja'Marr Chase to draft Kyle Pitts, but it was not egregious at the time. Hindsight is, of course, 2020, but Kyle Pitts was a very, very rare prospect. He was 6'6", 245, had a 98th percentile wingspan, which obviously helps for catching passes, and for that matter, a 93rd percentile hand size too. Oh, and he ran a 4.44 40. That was the definition of a built-in-a-lab prospect, and he played like it in his rookie year. He had a down year in 2022 and also got hurt, but over the last 2 years, had over 600 yards in each season and finished 11th in receiving yards for tight ends in 2023 and 13th in 2024. I think there's a misconception as to who Kyle Pitts is as a player, and people make him out to be like he's an all-time bust, but he's not. Sure, he's underwhelming for a top 4 pick, and I wouldn't argue that, but having nearly 200 receptions and nearly 2,700 receiving yards is a lot different than taking a Treylon Burks or Jalen Reagor in the first round for reference. I understand one was selected in the top 4 and the others mentioned were picks 18 and 21, but Kyle Pitts is not a bust the way people want to make him out to be. He's not a hit, but he's not a bust either, and 4 years later, this is a C+. The San Francisco 49ers traded a fortune to go up and get North Dakota State quarterback Trey Lance as they sent their 2021 first-round pick, their 2022 and 2023 first-round picks, as well as a third-round pick in 2022 to secure their franchise quarterback. The trade made a lot of sense at the time as they were coming off of a bad season in 2020, as they had countless season-ending injuries, unfortunately similar to the 2024 season, and they figured that they weren't going to be selecting this high again for quite some time, and that they should go up and get their guy in a loaded quarterback class. And to be completely honest, I agree with the thought process, but Trey Lance did not work out for the 49ers, not even close, and in a lot of ways, you can argue that Brock Purdy saved both Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's jobs, but in Lance's 49ers career, he threw just 102 passes and threw just 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. With the 49ers coming off of an NFC Championship game appearance in Brock Purdy's rookie year, they had a decision to make, and that decision was to either roll with Brock Purdy or to admit they made a mistake with this pick and to move on, despite how much draft capital was invested. And needless to say, the Trey Lance selection did not work out, an F grade. Zach Wilson was the number 2 pick, and there are a lot of Jets fans still mad to this day, rightfully so might I add, that they beat the Rams in Week 15 of the 2020 season. They were 0-13 at the time, and Jets fans were hoping they would go 0-16 so they could get the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck in Trevor Lawrence. Now, unfortunately, Zach Wilson didn't work out as the Jets starting quarterback, as during his time with the team, he was 12-21 as a starter, threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and there were countless bad moments during his time in the Big Apple. What was incredibly frustrating about Wilson, aside from, well, a lot of things, was just how often he took sacks during his time in New York. He took forever to throw as the game was far too fast for him, and his pressure to sack ratio was incredibly high, meaning he couldn't escape pressure and got himself into a lot of bad situations. I thought the Jets did everything they reasonably could to give him a chance to be the guy, especially entering his second year. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall in one draft is a great haul and one that any team would take, but it didn't matter much when Wilson couldn't produce. The hope was for him to develop behind Aaron Rodgers in 2023, and that maybe we would see him become a better player down the road, but that thought process ended pretty quickly. He was traded to the Broncos prior to the 24 season, and I think we know what draft grade is coming, an F. Trevor Lawrence was the number 1 pick in the 2021 draft, and the hype around Lawrence as a prospect was the most we've seen since Andrew Luck. Unfortunately, Trevor didn't have a good start to his career for several reasons, and it was due in large part to the organization failing him from the start. Whether it was Urban Meyer as his head coach, or his top 3 receivers in his rookie year being Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, and Laquan Treadwell, the 4th was Dan Arnold if you were wondering, and needless to say it was a long year for the Jags. Things turned around in 2022 and even for a good chunk of 2023 as they started out 8-3 before losing several games down the stretch, which carried into 2024. Trevor Lawrence has not been the number 1 pick that he was hyped to be, and I fully acknowledge that, but I also think it's fair to say the Jags have done a tremendous job in limiting his success. Again, Trevor isn't completely innocent within all of this, but this has been a tough situation from the minute he was drafted. I love the future with him, Liam Cohen, and especially Brian Thomas Jr., and I do believe the best is yet to come. Remember, he is only 25 years old, but for being as highly touted of a prospect as he was, and for him throwing just 69 touchdowns in 4 years, along with a 22-38 record in his first 4 years, well, there needs to be a lot of context around this grade, but ultimately, this pick gets a B. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 46% of people watching are subscribed. It helps tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.